I just sent you info on the old Kelly house in Houston, Texas. I used to rent there with 4 other people. It's a 3-story, turn-of-the-century house built by Mr. Kelly. He owned Kelly Lumber Company and used this lumber to build the house. The rent house goes for about $2,300 to $2,000 a month as of current. It has a long history of hauntings that started right after Miss Kelly committed suicide. We found out about this info by accident, which I will describe later. I was the first to experience the haunting. I just moved in and had a friend over. The front window blinds at the entrance slammed shut and closed by themselves. It scared my friend so bad, he ran out of the house. I shared the house with 4 other adults. 2 of them, ladies, were amateur mediums. Just local psychic fairs and healing centers was their occupation. We overlooked the house together before we rented. Upstairs in the master bathroom is a set of old French windows above the sinks. It has a crank to open the windows. 2 of us tried to open it, but it was weathered and painted shut. We forced it, and it would not budge. That year, the hard freeze came early, and our first evidence to share together of the haunting became known. All 5 adults and 2 children were accounted for. Matt, one of the roommates, came down from taking a shower and asked was there any reason for us having the other bathroom windows open. Sandy and I looked at each other with raised eyebrows, with disbelief. We asked Matt again to be sure we had heard him right. We investigated. Sure enough, when we got to the top of the stairs, you could feel the cold winds blowing. As we entered the bathroom, Sandy and I stood shocked to see the French windows fully opened. We debated the issue in our heads, but there is no way Matt himself could open the French windows by himself, even if he was on steroids. I tried to reel in the windows using the crank. It was rusty and hard to close. I had to use tools to shut it. That moment on, we all knew we had a problem on our hands. A few weeks later, Sandy wanted to use the house as a gathering of friends to share vegetarian meals. Her ambition expanded to the public. For public relations, she wanted to write something about the house, but steered away from haunting stories. She struggled with different concepts, but succumbed to telling the story of a couple and their tragic love for each other. The story is about a recently engaged, mischievous young lady that plays a practical joke on her fiancé at their engagement party. From the upstairs balcony, she pours water on her boo down below. This enrages him, and he scolds her with fever. Shocked and dismayed, she bursted out into tears and ran to the other side of the house to the porch, which was located on the 2nd floor. Heartbroken and drunken with wine, she hangs herself. It wasn't until violent weather did the secrets come out. On October 13th, 1993, a tornado paid us a visit. It was all over the nation, in CNN. It was simply unheard of. A tornado touching down near a large downtown area, especially in Houston. The tornado struck our neighbors next door in the apartment building across the street. Because of her national cover, and Sandy's interview with news reporters being broadcast over the nation, it prompted an old resident to pay us a visit. The granddaughter of Mr. and Mrs. Kelly came by to see if we were all right, and wanted to share pictures and stories about the house. We wanted to ask her questions too, without sounding nuts. We already had a couple of occurrences of the haunting since then. We decided to manipulate her in going upstairs to the upstairs master bathroom. Then, we unfolded to her the news about the house and its little gifts. She hesitated on entering the bathroom, which raised questions in our minds. We told her about the windows, and suddenly she started to get very nervous. She finally told us that the house was in fact haunted. It was in that very room where she found her grandmother hanging from the ceiling. One night way after the death of her grandmother, she went into that room and saw the apparition of her grandmother laying in a fetal position in the corner of the room. She could hear faint sobs in the room many times before, and in another encounter from that same room, she saw 3 ghosts hanging from the ceiling. She said they were too dark to make out, that they were just silhouettes. It was like they were hung like chandeliers and were swinging gently. The room used to be a screened-in porch overlooking her grandmother's garden. She was so overwrought with pain in her knees so much, so she couldn't garden anymore. It crippled her to the point where she was using a wheelchair and had an elevator installed. She couldn't take it anymore and took her own life. Margaret, one of the other roommates, always complained about her knees. I started to have problems myself. She told us about their dog, which is buried out back near the pool. The granddaughter heard scratching noises when she was a little girl at the back door. The dog had been dead for years. She would hear a cabinet open and shut when the scratching sound occurred. Then the sounds would stop. She says of seeing an apparition of her grandmother in the garden, and it was too much to bear, and never stepped foot in the house again till this day. I would be more than glad one day to show you the house. Many people that lived in the house had shared similar stories and are still around the neighborhood. Drop a word or two. When I was in my 20s, I'm 30 now, I used to always go camping with my older brother during the autumn months in Washington State. This story won't be very long, but it'll always be an unforgettable experience. On one of the days we were venturing out to go camping, we ended up taking the back roads on the way to the campground. The total drive was about 3 hours long, and got up early in the morning to make the drive. If you're unfamiliar with Washington State scenery, it is breathtaking. Lots of trees towering over you as you drive through, mountainous landscapes, green pastures, etc. It is, in my humble opinion, the best place to be in America. Well, anyway, we ended up staying for a couple of nights and set up a tent in the middle of these woods in the campground. It was just us and nature. I remember we sat on a log and built up a fire every night, roasted s'mores, admired the beauty of the nature here, and just took in the impressive scenery, as we usually do. One of the nights we were doing this, my brother thought he heard another person scream "help me" from afar. "Josh, you think that person is in trouble?" he remarked. I didn't hear the sound, so I dismissed it and told him how absurd it was, because I was certain we were the only ones here. "Come on, Tim, we always camp here. Nobody is here." At that point, my brother insisted that he heard a voice, pleading for help. He even said that while we were asleep in the tent one of the nights, he could see a shadow moving around just outside the tent. He grabbed his flashlight and shined it in the direction of where he saw the shadow moving, but it was gone. Another night, he could have sworn that someone was unzipping the tent while we were sleeping. He took out his flashlight and got out of the tent to investigate. He said that he saw a mist slowly disappear and dissolve into the trees. I remember the last night we were there, my brother and I had a debate on whether or not the campgrounds here used to be an Indian settlement. We later found out that the Native Americans were known to frequent these lands, and that there was a story long ago that a little boy drowned in a nearby river. He has been known to haunt the campgrounds. Anywho, as we were talking, the campfire that we just started went out the moment we mentioned anything about Native Americans. It was not windy at all, and the fire was very strong. It startled us so much that after a couple hours, we said we had enough and ended up driving home later that night. It was about 3 a.m. as we were heading back home, and we started the car up. I ended up driving us back home because my brother was too rattled from all the events. Now, this is the freakiest part. My brother told me that as we were leaving the campground, he saw an old Native American man with a beard in the rearview mirror, with a tomahawk in his hands. He was pointing towards the car, and he looked completely human. I looked into the rearview mirror myself and saw absolutely nothing. Either my brother was playing games with me, or we just invaded the territory of natives, and they were very upset with us. Hi, my name is Diane. Growing up in Detroit, my family lived in a house that was haunted. On several occasions, my family would hear loud crashes that could only be described as boxes of dishes being smashed. Everyone in my family experienced several ghost contacts in one form or another. On 3 different occasions with 3 different family members, a man about 60 was seen wearing a plaid flannel shirt. This man merely stood there, looking at the person, never attempting communication or harm. I was about 8 when he appeared, and I was the first one to see him. Although my sister, who was 7 years older than me, was not present. I'm telling you this right now so later you will understand. My relatives from out of town were visiting, and the adults were sitting in the living room after dinner. I was extremely quiet, in the hopes that only a child can have, that they would forget that I was there. I was sitting on the couch, and the front door was open, with the screen door closed. I saw the man wearing a red plaid shirt, standing at the front door and looking in. I told my family about this, and they thought I was overtired, so they put me to bed. Later that same week, my older sister was getting into the shower when she saw a man in a red plaid shirt standing in the bathroom with her. She freaked out and told my mother, who this time listened more closely. She then revealed that she too had seen the man in the red shirt standing in the kitchen by the sink, looking like he was getting a glass of water. All family members routinely heard footsteps throughout the house, especially going upstairs into an attic bedroom. The steps would continue across the floor. All family members experienced this together and separate on several different occasions. My sister, whose bedroom it was for a while, admitted she was scared to sleep in that room and was frightened, very often thinking that someone was coming into her room. I later had that same bedroom and became so afraid of it that I began sleeping on the living room sofa. On several occasions, dishes in the house would break when put in a certain china cabinet. On 2 separate occasions, a silver meat platter in the china cabinet, whose doors were kept closed, flew across the room at my mother. Lights turned off in the basement would be on when we woke up every single morning. The dryer would routinely come on by itself, and even after the electric was checked, this still continued. The basement had an old coal room that had been converted into a storage room with paint cans and stuff. This room had a negative feeling, and no one in the family liked to even go in there. Likewise, no one in the family wanted to go under the stairs, although no one ever had a mysterious occurrence in those places. Every family member in that house had their name called on different occasions, many times when they were home alone. One occasion comes to mind. My father, who was home alone, was working in the basement. My mother's sister and I were out shopping at the mall. He distinctly heard the front door open, even though it was locked, and someone walked across the living room and kitchen. He went upstairs and found the front door locked, as he knew he would. It was then that someone called his name. He answered, and no one said anything after that. Another all-family experience came when we all went to visit my grandmother, who lived across town. We even brought the family dog. We were returning home, and as we pulled in the driveway, I saw the drapes move back, like someone was watching us return. I remember distinctly asking if anybody had seen that. My father countered, "What did you see?" I told him, and he and my mother and sister agreed that that is what they saw too. My dad went into the house first while we waited in the car. Everything was just as we left it, with the doors locked. On one occasion I awoke to having a woman standing at the foot of my bed. She disappeared as soon as I got a good look at her. She said her name was Anne, and she had lived in that house. No one in that house ever saw Anne again. This house had an addition that was a formal dining room off the back. It had built-in china cabinets that would fly open on no occasion, even after my mother put hooks on them, thinking the wood was swelling. Music was often playing softly. All in all, it was a weird place to live, and we were all very glad to move, but we did live there for over 20 years. My parents moved into an apartment, as I did in a different location, while staying with them because I had become extremely ill. I had a unique experience of a ghost nurse who took care of me. My parents were asleep, and I was lying on the sofa, so hot, but lucid. I could hear them snoring from the bedroom. I heard soft slippers shuffle across the floor, and felt a cold hand lovingly touch my forehead, checking my fever, a comfort. I was not afraid, and somehow thought Grandma is here, but I had no evidence of this. I remember keeping my eyes closed, just knowing my nurse did not want me to see her. I was very conscious of my parents snoring, and knew it was not them. When the feet shuffled off, I opened my eyes, and got up and looked at my parents. They were sound asleep. The whole situation lasted maybe 2 minutes, yet I started to improve that night. I now live in Indiana, and a few years ago, my husband and I rented a little farmhouse. Our landlord lived right behind us, and the farmhouse used to belong to his grandparents, now both deceased. Not long after we moved in, we began to hear things, and my 2-year-old daughter would wake up in fear, crying about a man in her room. I would say, "Where?" and she would point to a corner of the room, but I would see nothing. We would often hear footsteps coming up the basement stairs with no one there. This is happening in front of other witnesses also. We would sometimes hear a man in the basement talking, but couldn't make out what he was saying. Now, the basement was a creepy place, where I always sensed being watched and followed. There was a little room that used to hold well water with a heavy door, that had the window painted white. I felt this room was evil, and I hated it. Unfortunately, my washer and dryer were down in the basement, so I had to go there often. For a long time, the ghost just made noises, not meant to scare, just moving about the house. Later, he would come into our bedroom at night. I never realized it until I saw your site and David and Sherry's site, but he came in the room a lot more than the 2 times I saw him in human form. I would either be asleep or almost asleep, and I would see a ball light drift slowly into the room. It would sometimes move to the side in front of my closet, or to my horror, it would come right at me and hover right above me. I didn't realize then that the orb was the ghost. I thought I was dreaming a weird dream that seemed like I was awake, because they saw the room exactly like I was awake. Apparently, because I was awake. I would be half asleep and angry at myself for having such terrifying visions, so I would angrily think in my mind, "Get out of here, stop," and it would disappear. Twice after that, I woke up to see a 30 to 40-year-old man with dark hair and a red and black lumberjack shirt. I would catch him staring at me beside my bed. Oddly, I was so tired that I just rolled over and went back to sleep. I found out later from my friend who used to live next door to the house that my landlord's grandfather had died in the house. His name was Pete. Also, he had been a grumpy old man. Funny thing was that both times I saw him, he was a younger man. Anyways, he never really bothered us, so we had no problem. We only moved out because we bought a new house this past year. To this day, I still can't believe I calmly co-abided with a ghost. Hey Phantoms, it's Phantom of Darkness obviously here, and I wanted to thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this experience of ghost stories from people from around the world. Well, I don't know if it's from around the world, but, people from various locations, probably in the US. I hope to get more English stories in because you know how I love Britain. You Brits, you awesome Brit. I don't know what I'm saying. Guys, I'm obviously dealing with a mouth issue with my dental stuff, so that's probably why I haven't been as active as usual. So please be patient with me while I just get that sorted. I actually got a root canal done, so I'm really finished with that now. So all I have to do is go back for another appointment and get that situated and get a permanent crown filling and all that good stuff that comes with actually securing my teeth to make sure it actually is okay. So I can narrate stories with you guys and it'll be great. So please take the opportunity to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, sharing this video like candy, like a Halloween candy, is actually what makes this channel go amazing. That's terribly grammar. I mean, that's terrible grammar. I can't even talk right now. But guys, anyway, can I ever talk? And I'm going to let you guys go. Well, I don't want you guys to go. But please comment in the comment section below which story you love the most. My favorite story was obviously the Native American story. Well, it's not obvious because I just told you guys, but you guys know what I mean. I gotta go. Really not making any sense at this point. I gotta go. Love you guys and good night.